Hello, everybody. It is great to see you all here. Thank you for coming out for our panel on public sector AI. As you heard, John Paul Farmer. I'm the president of Smart City Expo USA, and I'm so fortunate to have with me two amazing panelists. On the far end, you see Katie Savage. Katie is the Secretary of Information Technology for the state of Maryland, working under Governor Wes Moore. And what's really interesting is that prior to this, she was at the federal level, in the Defense Digital Service, where she was a senior official, and further back in your career at the local level. So one of the few people who's worked at local, state, and federal levels of government. Next to me, we've got Amartyo Sen. Amartyo was actually one of the founding members of OpenAI's go-to-market team for public sector. And so he's been working on AI issues for close to a decade now, AWS, an AI startup as well. So he's got a great perspective across how OpenAI is thinking about public sector, but also how a lot of the public sector governments that he engages with are addressing these really important issues. So I'm going to rewind a little bit to some of my earlier experiences. When I was appointed Chief Technology Officer of New York City by Mayor de Blasio in 2019, one of the things that I proposed and got hired to do was to develop an AI strategy and to build some AI capacity. Back then, we really had to convince people that AI mattered, that this wasn't science fiction, this wasn't something out in the future, that this was here and important to invest in now. We did build an AI studio. We brought in the first director of AI for the city of New York, but then the pandemic came, and again, everyone got reoriented to the urgent needs. We didn't get our AI strategy out until 2021, which was still early because it was a year later that OpenAI released ChatGPT, and suddenly you didn't have to convince people anymore. Everybody got it. Within a matter of weeks or months, everyone knew this was important to their organization, whether they're in the private sector or the public sector. So it's very different now than it was then, and a lot has changed. What I want to do is start with Katie, if we could, and if you could just give us an update of what's happening in Maryland on AI. What is your role with relationship to AI, so people can kind of know what's up?
Well, thanks so much for having me this morning. Governor Moore has been really forward-leaning in terms of artificial intelligence. So we've done a couple of things since assuming office about 2 years ago. First, and I think this is really key, we've consolidated a couple of roles that were previously in the governor's office under my shop at the Department of Information Technology. So the state chief information security officer was already a report to me, but we also moved the chief data officer as well as the chief privacy officer under the Department of Technology as well, because we feel like those are really key parts of our AI strategy in terms of producing both responsible and productive AI. So that was one piece. The second step, we created an AI sub-cabinet. So I chair the sub-cabinet, and then it's myself and a number of my peers who are secretaries of other agencies where we feel like artificial intelligence will have either the most impact, such as the Department of Health or Human Services, Labor, et cetera. So we've been chairing that, or bringing together that group of secretaries chaired by myself for the past year or so. And the third thing, which we released back in December of this past year, is an AI roadmap. So we, again, working with all of these different agencies across the state of Maryland, put together a roadmap of both where we think the technology will impact the departments, how we think about workforce development in terms of upskilling our current workforce, hiring new talent, and then finally, continuing to lay the foundation for data, privacy, et cetera, and kind of setting the stage for AI to evolve in the state over time.
And a quick follow-up, the strategy and the roadmap, how much of that is unique to Maryland, and how much do you think is actually useful to others, especially other governments?
No, it's a great question. Nishant Shah, who is our artificial intelligence officer, has been regularly convening with other AI advisors around the states, and I myself, engage with the other state CIOs. So I think it's a mix of both. We've also tried to follow the guidelines set under the previous administration with the Department of Homeland Security and NIST, et cetera. So there's a lot that I think we all share. Some of the principles, which I know we'll talk about later, is something that I think we want to see universal adoption around in terms of transparency and fairness and traceability, et cetera. But then the roadmap also is sort of Maryland specific. And we were chatting about this before. Some agencies in Maryland are really forward-leaning, excited to use the technology. Others are sort of unsure of how this will impact them. So that's where it gets a little bit Maryland-specific, where we're trying to really encourage agencies to adopt it in ways that make sense for their mission.
Awesome. Amartyo, so you work with lots of governments, and would love to hear what you're seeing. To what extent are mindsets shifting, or to what extent is education necessary to shift those mindsets? So if you could talk about where things are right now in terms of your conversations with the public sector.
Sure. Again, thank you for having us, John, and so great to be here with you, Katie. Well, let's first call out the fact that the rate of change in the industry as it regards to AI is almost near constant. Even just this year, as it pertains to OpenAI, we've released Operator, which is a agentic workflow where you can have a browser complete tasks on your behalf. We have Deep Research, another agentic capability with multi-step research and produces research output. All the way to most recently our image generator, which has had quite a moment with being able to do all kinds of things. Beyond that, it's also things around AI, right? So it's Stargate, which was like investment in American infrastructure, and as well as 4 weeks ago we announced that we're about at 400 million weekly active users, and now we're at 500 million weekly active users. So just within that 4 weeks or so. So the rate of change is quite a bit. So with that mindset here, what we're seeing with governments is one of two things. One is just general paralysis, right? Not really sure when they're looking to lean in and how to lean in. And then second is also this ability to understand the technology itself. And so what I've always recommended, which is really what Maryland's doing from the get-go, is experimenting, right? Really increasing the AI IQ or the skill set of the workforce and being able to use the technology to make sure that you can evolve with the technology. Really the metaphor that I tend to use is when you're looking to train for a marathon. If you start running bit by bit, there's a good shot that you're going to go through the marathon and complete it without too much pain. The more time that you let go by, the harder it's going to be be able to complete that marathon. And so that's the mindset shift that I've been seeing is really not knowing where to start, where it's just as simple as getting started and using the technology itself.
Thanks. I think the point about the rate of change is something everybody sees. We see it every day with the headlines that are coming fast and furious. When I opened up this conference yesterday, talked about the speed and the density and how those two things make this really different from a lot of the other technology changes and even technology revolutions that we've gone through before. Can we talk about, given where we are today, because things have changed a lot in the last couple of years, but there's still a lot more change to come. Where is AI appropriate now, and where do you think it's not really there yet? I think the point about experimenting is a really good one. So if we could kind of get your ideas on where it's being used in Maryland, for example, Katie, and then any ideas you have to share as well.
Yeah, sure. So AI is a lot of things, and there's a lot of novelty to AI itself. One thing to think about here is it's also just good old-fashioned change management. And so with that, the first thing that I always recommend is invest in your people. That means invest in them in terms of skill training, AI literacy, workforce development, however you want to term it. Invest in your people. The second piece is that unique really to the public sector, unlike startups or enterprises that can pivot their mission or organization strategy, your mission doesn't change fundamentally. If you're in a Department of Health, you're making sure that you're releasing safe and accurate public health information to your citizens and residents, so on and so forth. So knowing that, it's really being able to focus on your strategic priorities and your initiatives that you're already focused on, and then figuring out how AI solves for that as opposed to the other way around. And then the last piece is really just a risk-based approach, right? And keeping that, as we always say, human in the loop. And this is something as simple as understanding where the risks lies, and that's really up to the agency to determine what that is. If you're translating a cafeteria menu to Spanish, not as high risk, right? Whereas if you're putting out important information about a weather alert, high risk, and so you would want to have certain safeguards in place. So those are the three ways that I would kind of recommend going about, that sort of shift.
Yeah, I'll add. one of the things that's been interesting is the way that AI has served as a bit of an audit function for us. Because to your point, obviously the models are built on data, and sometimes what we've seen in some of the early models that we've been developing is that the data is wrong. A pilot that was done in Montgomery County in Maryland, just a sort of simple chatbot built with Copilot, sort of meant to be a virtual assistant 311 type system, but we realized, we sort of looking at all the corners that it was pulling from, there's a lot of outdated information. So it's both, there are certainly things that we need human in the loop, like you don't want AI making insurance claim final decisions, things like that. But it can also be, there's also sort of like a learning curve, literally, for the data. And when we sort of turn these models on, it does expose where there are things that are outdated or need to be updated or made more relevant. If I can share an example of where, we're sort of successfully built one of these models. Some of my work is in partnership with the Department of Human Services and the Department of Health, which in Maryland are two separate departments. We collectively oversee an organization called MD Think, soon to be rebranded to Maryland Benefits. It's largely a benefits sort of body of work around delivering benefits, so Medicare, Medicaid, SNAP, WIC, et cetera. Another program that we roll out through Maryland Benefits is summer EBT for students. And that's a great example of a program that we're developing this summer that will have an AI, it will have a chatbot powered by Copilot that will sort of provide parents who are looking for information on the Summer Sunbucks program, how to use the program if they're qualified, et cetera. And so that's a really powerful example where, to your point, it's just sort of informational, it's not decisional, but it's going to save a lot of time for parents who are trying to get this benefit into the hands of their kids as quickly as possible.
I think the point that you made about data is one I just want to plus one, because when we did the New York City AI strategy, one of the things that came out of it was a recommendation and an acknowledgement that until we get our data house in order, we're never going to actually maximize our benefits from AI. So I think this is transitioning very smoothly into practical examples. So get concrete, talk about what you're seeing. Amartyo, let's go to you. What are you seeing in your conversations in terms of the governments that you work with and how they're using generative AI in creative, interesting, and impactful ways?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, obviously I'm biased, but I'm the most excited about public sector AI use cases. That's why we're all here today. And it's mostly because of the impact that it has on not just government employees, but also really citizens, residents that benefit from that. So I'll start with the most fresh one. Last week, Governor Shapiro and his team announced the conclusion of their first-year pilot with ChatGPT Enterprise. And this was across a couple hundred licenses across 14 different state agencies in the Commonwealth. And the results were pretty staggering, but I'll start with some of the use cases. The first was just a simple HR use case. There's thousands of job descriptions that have to be navigated and classified, and it's quite a manual process without AI, but by being able to create a custom GPT, which is a customized workflow in ChatGPT Enterprise, they were able to use that GPT to navigate and analyze 3,600 classifications in one go, which is just a huge time save when it comes to navigating all of that data and wealth of information. Similarly, so is IT procurements and contracting. Before the pilot, the Commonwealth had about 93 different IT policies that vendors had to follow. Using ChatGPT and its ability to synthesize and analyze all that information, have consolidated that into 34 policies. And much of that now is just easier for vendors to follow, and then also streamlines the process on the Commonwealth's behalf. But beyond.
So just to clarify, the Commonwealth itself consolidated their policies. So it's not simply the private sector users of those policies who are doing the work. The Commonwealth was actually able to improve the underlying government function.
Correct, exactly, and it's using their domain expertise in their procurement policies, but again, combining that with the power of an AI platform, an AI native platform like ChatGPT Enterprise. I think part of also the use cases here is also the impacts of it, as I mentioned, and just some quick stats here. Of the couple of hundred licenses that were given, 85% really enjoyed using ChatGPT Enterprise, saving about 8 hours per employee per week. And with that kind of efficiency, it just allows the employees to be able to focus on really high-level strategic initiatives. And that's just one example, right? We've got plenty of others in, a Transportation Authority in California, State of Minnesota's Enterprise Translation Office, which has done 5,000 translations since July of last year, reducing delivery time by 70% and redirecting $100,000 a month towards other statewide initiatives. And then on the federal level, we've got Los Alamos National Lab and their scientific research and kind of focus on using ChatGPT to help with that. So the list goes on and on. I think the thing that we keep focusing on is we want to move away from hype and actually into tangible stories. And a lot of that is very much in just empowering employees because, as I just mentioned, you all, the government employees are the domain experts on what they're doing on a day-to-day, but giving them a powerful solution like ChatGPT Enterprise helps them just do their job just a little bit better. And that's just part of some of the results that we're seeing.
Great. Katie, if you want to share more examples from Maryland or other examples that inspire you.
I really just want to sort of underscore what you said, and it goes back to this idea of, it can play this auditing function, and what you highlighted, I think, is really important. It was then, up to the Commonwealth to say, this is all the information that's been gathered, and these policies are actually very convoluted, and so it can kind of sort of be this, like you said, sort of synthesizing function in a way that can then help you look at the process. So likewise, we did a pilot with our Department of the Environment to look at licensing and permitting, or plurmitting as we like to call it. And same thing, there's so many different processes, so many different applications, and trying to figure out, is there a way that we can streamline the process? So that's one piece. The Sunbucks chatbot that I mentioned is another. We're also, I am not naive enough to think that I know all the use cases for all the agencies, and so we've also, turned on Gemini, and in turn, want to see state agencies sort of experiment. And so we're, setting, part of the reason we spent the past year putting the roadmap and ethics and guidelines in place is so that we can make, ChatGPT and Gemini and Copilot and sort of all these resources available. We want, within bounds, we want employees to experiment a little bit so that we can see what some of these other use cases would be. But I can't underscore enough. I think it really does kind of call in a way that's really difficult for government employees, for vendors, for the public to sort of get their arms around all this information. And we have tens of thousands of web pages. And as our Chief Digital Experience Officer, Marcy Jacobs, says, you shouldn't need a degree in Maryland state government to be able to find something. And so a lot of where we found this to be a really valuable resource is that kind of like synthesis.
Just to quickly add to that, the most powerful stories that I've heard are when an agency has given widespread access, similar to how Maryland has, and across different tools, and then gotten some feedback and mind share from government employees about what works best. An example that I love to share is actually, we had a conversation at the DoD level about what are the different use cases they would want to use this for, and an arm was raised, and it was the Army chaplains. And the head of the task force at that point was asking, well, why would you want to use it? They said, to write our sermons. Well, rightfully so, the captain asked, well, isn't that your job? Is that something that you're supposed to be doing manually or putting attention to? And so the chaplain actually responded saying, well, actually, my job is to take care of the mental health of our service members. So the more time I can spend with them, the more time I am actually doing my job better. And so that's just an example of, you won't know the use cases until you really democratize access, and that's just the best way to learn, especially as a government institution.
That's a really interesting example, especially because of so much of the debate around human and machine and how they relate to one another and engage, and we think about people of faith and clergy. Very interesting. Before we move on from examples, I'd love to share with everyone some low-hanging fruit, and I'll start because even before LLMs burst onto the scene the way they have, we saw the power of just simple anomaly detection. In one example from New York City is buildings. So there are tons of buildings that are owned or occupied by New York City government, and New York City government pays, this is a few years ago, 15,000 energy bills per month, 15,000 energy bills per month, and they had people who would review every line to try to see, does this number look right, does this number look too high, we don't want to waste taxpayer dollars. Number one, people aren't very good at that. Their eyes glaze over. It's really hard to review that many lines of anything and be accurate, but also it kept them from doing higher value work. We did a simple AI process and saw that over the course of a year, we saved $5 million, and we were more accurate. And these people now had time to do something that, frankly, was a better fit for human beings to do. So that's not just something for energy bills. There are so many similar tasks that are very repetitive, and again, not necessarily the best fit for human beings to do with high accuracy. So I'm curious whether it's something similar to that or something completely different. What's the low-hanging fruit that you see?
Yeah, I'll build on that and use an example from my DoD days, satellite imagery. You know, when I would spend time at Strategic Command, you know, you have analysts who are just looking at satellite images over and over and over. And that's something that, you know, there's sort of minute changes day over day, but, you know, over time, you know, it can tell you a picture of what's going on in the world. And so that's a great example of something that could be automated. And to your point, it frees up their time to do sort of higher value tasks. You know, I get asked a lot, you know, in terms of workforce development, is AI going to replace the workforce? And, you know, I can tell you as at least a state official, you know, we are, you know, sort of constrained by the economy, as we all are, and, you know, we need to find ways to make our workforce even more productive. And so whether it's, you know, satellite imagery at the DoD level, you know, or back to the Sunbox, you know, AI chatbot example, that frees up, you know, DHS caseworkers to be able to interact directly with families, and they're not, you know, answering the phone all day about, you know, how the summer EBT program works. So I agree with you. I think there's lots of examples that we can find in the wild of, you know, where is there something that's not really, it's important, and oftentimes is a really large data set, but it's not the highest value. You know, another example that I'm excited to spend more time on, you know, I have the state cybersecurity team under me as well. And when you talk about anomaly detection, I mean, there's so much data, you know, that we collect in our, you know, in our security operations center that can tell you, you know, a story of where patterns of bad actors might be emerging. And again, that's something that, like with satellites, it's something that you kind of, you know, really need to take a long view on, but it's hard to task someone with that, and, you know, every day it might not be the highest and best use. So there's a few examples across domains that I think we can be really creative about.
And I would say cybersecurity is a good example because it's something that in this day and age, human beings simply can't do. You can't hire your way out of that problem. You need to use advanced tools because the bad guys are using advanced tools. And just the sheer number of events that you need to monitor on a government web space or attack surface, it's just too many for any team to do unless you're using these tools. So good example. Amartyo.
Yeah, I think the low-hanging fruit that we've seen, if I could sit here and say, oh, public works or public safety is a really strong example, and or communications is, or finance is. The truth is, all of them are, right? Because it's knowledge work or computer-based employees that just are doing tasks every single day. But what I want to take a step further is actually the transformation from one-off tasks to entire workflows. And so what I've seen is someone in charge of putting out communications around weather alerts, right? So if you're in a part of the country that is more prone to tornadoes or hurricanes, typically you have to go through multiple different systems and softwares to collect the right information, develop a press release, publish that. And what we're seeing is actually folks being able to consolidate that into, you know, an AI native platform, right? Like, so this is something that has multiple capabilities or multiple tools in this one platform that can combine this all together. And so the possibilities are endless, right? We're seeing legal teams use this for contract reviews and then have that human in the loop. We're seeing budget teams use the data analysis function to be able to forecast more efficiently. And so there is no, I would say there's always no limit to the use case, but it's a matter of what is your team currently focused on, or what is their biggest bottleneck, and then can they apply AI to that to then, you know, really just to solve that a little bit quicker and more efficiently.
Great. I hope all of you have found these examples useful. I do. But it's also not all sunshine and roses. There are very real concerns about how AI is being used or could be used. And so I'd like to pivot now and talk about trust and safety. So Katie, going to you, could you talk about the types of guardrails or the way in which Maryland is ensuring that AI is being used responsibly? Yeah,
and I'll go back to, you know, the consolidation of the chief data officer and chief privacy officer, you know, under me as well. You know, on the data front, you know, we've been talking about this quite a bit, but we need to ensure the quality of our data before we roll anything out, whether that's a chatbot or it's something that's, you know, a little bit more decisional. So sort of looking at the quality of our data is really important. On the privacy front, you know, one of the sort of early conundrums when I took the role, it was thinking about some of these tools that were emerging and realizing, a lot of them are free and or, open source. And so that we as a state are not in a contractual agreement with them, which means, we're not sort of, the company is not bound to, honor our terms and conditions for where customer data is being stored or managed or what the engagement looks like. And so it's we're talking about how we want state agencies and our employees to experiment, but we also needed to pump the brakes a little bit and say, even though it's free, we would prefer to be in a licensing agreement with this agency, so that, or with this with this organization, so that we can sort of hammer out the T's and C's and make sure that data is being stored and managed in a way that protects privacy of the state. We obviously process a lot of important decisions and information about how we run the state's operations, but then also to the extent that our constituents and residents are using it, we want to make sure their privacy is protected as well. And in the event of a breach, we need to be able to trace who might be impacted by that. So that's some of the guardrails that we've put in place there. I'll also say that, when we think about our AI strategy in the state, it's the productive use, which we're really excited about in sort of these examples, but it's also the responsible side. And so we've tried to focus on kind of ensuring that, we are providing sort of skills and trainings. We've made a couple of courses available to state employees through our partnership with US Innovate. So we're trying to get people more sort of comfortable and also aware of the the ramifications. The last thing that I'll speak to on this front, this is true. One of the things I push is that we should be putting these guardrails in place for all technology, not just AI-powered technology. So one of the things that I'm looking at is just our overall software review process in the state. And again, whether it's powered by AI or not, we need to be more thoughtful about what the authority to operate is, what the we were talking a little bit before backstage about procurement, and I think up until this point, the procurement process, my department's involvement in the procurement process has been, do you already offer the service? Yes, no. If you don't, sure, go work with our general services department to procure it. And that can't be. We need to have a sort of continuous feedback loop that does engage data management, does engage privacy. And that's not just for AI, but it's for all technology. So thinking about the overall software review process.
And I think that's a great point about how software products and licenses are reviewed in government and the way it's traditionally been done, which has been kind of at a single gate. And once you're through the gate, it was done. And in reality, these tools and systems are constantly changing, and their impacts are probably changing as well, and we should be assessing that repeatedly. Amartyo, could you talk a little bit? I know at OpenAI, alignment is an idea, a concept, the idea that AI systems should align with human values. And so what does that look like inside OpenAI, and then in your conversations, your engagements with governments?
Yeah, it's John. It's not just an idea and concept. It's very much a core part of it's a team. It's an organizational effort. It's a core part of who we are. I'll answer that in two ways. I'll start with the tactical pieces, because even in the last 48 hours or 24 hours that I've been here, there's just been a lot of questions around what happens to my data, what does OpenAI do with it? And I realized that that's on me to understand. It's an education piece, right? So the tactical piece here is for our business grade offerings, right? So our self-service offering, as well as our enterprise grade offering, we have an enterprise privacy agreement, which means that anything entered into those products, we don't use to train our models. And that very much abides by a lot of the policies that states put out in terms of using AI platforms for their uses. Again, that's our business grade versions. For our consumer versions, the things that you and I use through our Gmails, even folks that use it in their work emails, you have the ability to toggle that off as well, right? So that it's not as automatic as people might think so. So that's the tactical pieces of it in terms of how we think about alignment or privacy at first. And then from an organizational standpoint, it's really built in the structure of OpenAI and how we operate today. So we have our research organization. So these are the hundreds of researchers that are dedicated to advancing the foundations or creating frontier models. So if you've heard of 4.0, 01, 4.5, 03, they're creating these models, but part of that is also the safety piece that goes into it, right? It's the post-training, it's understanding the model behavior, and it's really sharing that and seeing if it's ready for release, right? That's all part of the research organization. We then have the applied organization, right? This is where we understand that our models can be great product experiences, but it's making sure that those products are safe to use, that they can be released to the public, and so we have red teaming efforts. We partner closely with government institutions, private sector institutions, and really making sure that our products are ready for public use. And then finally, we have a deployment arm, which is really what I'm part of, where we deploy this technology into states like Maryland or Commonwealth of Pennsylvania or private sector like Moderna and Morgan Stanley, and then we get feedback. And that feedback piece is incredibly important because that's iterative deployment. So we get feedback of this is not working or this is working, and then that really informs us of, one, how do we approach our research roadmap, and also like how do we approach our technology, but then two, again, alignment and safety. Like, is this something that's really benefiting, again, all of humanity? So that's really our approach from an organizational standpoint.
Thank you. Looking ahead, we've talked a bit about the importance of procurement reform, just new ways of doing procurement. Perhaps these were good ideas 5, 10 years ago, but it seems like they're really necessary now. Talent's another really important thing. You've got to have people who understand these tools, understand how to use them, understand how to buy them, what questions to ask, ideally understand how to use them in their daily life to be more productive and serve citizens and residents better. Can we talk, and Kay, let's go to you first. Can we talk a little about how Maryland is thinking about upskilling its people? Maybe that's just government employees. Maybe that goes beyond government employees. I mean, you look at like examples from Finland, where they years ago did a kind of upskilling the nation on AI, and it seems to have really paid off in terms of how they've been able to quickly adopt the tools. So I'm curious how you're thinking about these issues in Maryland.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to travel to Estonia last year, and you talk about a country that invested early on in sort of upskilling, making sure everybody had laptops and everybody had digital literacy, and that's paid off. And that's I think it's something that could be possible. Maryland is roughly the same size as Estonia, but it's a big investment. And again, thinking about where we are and this sort of economic environment that might be challenging. So again, we've sort of relied on, at a minimum, making some of these courses available, through our partnership with Innovate US. But it is something that we need to invest in. One of the early ideas that the state kind of came up with as a model prior to AI was, starting with data, there was agency data officers. And then when we had a privacy office, we also required agencies to have an agency privacy officer. And now we're requiring sort of an AI point of contact. And it is getting really overwhelming for agencies such as health and human services, et cetera, to have sort of point people on all these areas. So one of the things we're thinking about is just how do we make this sort of like a generalized skill set? Like how do we make the connections between these things so that it's not like you're the privacy person, you're the data person, you're the AI person, but how do we sort of bridge the gap and talk about this as like a comprehensive skill set around, again, like data management and ethics. So we're trying to make it a little bit more seamless, especially for state employees. In addition to that, we've also just started hiring talent to the state that is specific to this. One of the things I'm most proud of is starting a digital service team and an AI enablement team in the state of Maryland. Talking to my peers in other states, Maryland was not alone in kind of seeing their IT shops as really stewards of technology and not technologists. And we were talking about that a little bit earlier. A lot of the skill set in technology departments so far has been, project management, which is great, and we need that. But we also need people who like deeply understand some of the implications of software, can build software, know how to buy and procure software. So we started a digital service team with engineers and designers and product managers. We've also started an AI enablement team. And some of the people on the team are really focused on this sort of ethical, responsible use and guidelines and partnering with our academic community and kind of the theory of it all. And then we have others that kind of tilt more towards our digital service team, which is around this enablement team and getting into some of these productive use cases.
Thank you. We are running close to time, but I want to give Amartyo a chance to answer this question about how do you and OpenAI think about upskilling and even more than that, ensuring there's comprehensive understanding of AI and AI tools from the audiences and the customers that you're working with.
Yeah, Phenomenal question. Well, I'll ask the audience a question first. Raise of hands of who's used ChatGPT before. Right, so I think the first step is the 500 million people that are using it on a weekly basis are experimenting on their own and already getting an idea of what the limitations are, but also what the capabilities are. We then combine that with, once you become a partner or a customer partner of ours, we have robust trainings that we've done. We've consolidated all of our learnings from over 1,000 deployments that we've done now, both in the private sector and public sector, and we distill that into learnings of how to effectively prompt, or how do you leverage a new feature like projects or deep research. And then on top of that, it's because of the rate of change is really quick, it's the ability to understand when you're using something like custom GPTs, what's next, right? And so for government employees, if they're thinking about, this is something I can really use on a day-to-day basis to help me write quicker emails, the next step is, well, if it can help me write quicker emails, can it help me also write, quicker press releases and so on and so forth. So we think about training as also iterative, right? It's not going to be a one and done. You'll always have a foundation, right, in terms of how you prompt more effectively or how do you interact with models more effectively. But beyond that, it's always, again, combining that domain expertise with the power of the technology. And then I think the biggest piece is partnering with internal stakeholders, so having an enablement team that also is your kind of center of excellence so that you can rely on what the organization really needs, but then also having the strength of public-private partnerships, right? So being able to partner with OpenAI directly and getting that training as well.
Super. One very last lightning round question. 5 years from now, is there something big and bold that you hope governments have done with AI by the year 2030?
Take it a little bit in a different direction, and it's back to my city days. I would love to see more engagement with the built environment. So I'll put that out there. I think the way transportation departments sort of leverage anomaly detection and predictive analytics, I'm really excited about that, and I don't want to lose sight of that even as we move into sort of LLM. So I would love to see it normalized in both places.
Excellent.
I have a much longer answer to this question, but I'll keep it short. I would love to see governments be the gold standard for AI adoption. I want governments to be the hub of AI innovation, where government is, where private sector comes to play, where citizens come to play, where government obviously leads the forefront of innovation. So an idea that I had was actually something I was reflecting on was Vivek Murthy, who's the former Surgeon General, talked about the epidemic loneliness that we have, right? Can we upskill? Can we automate things like press releases for weather, but then upskill and reskill those employees for more social work or for more mental health services for our community? Can we build more community engagement around that? So what I would love to see is just the gold standard of AI adoption be the public sector.
Thank you. I'll say it one last time. I think this moment really is different. The speed and the density of change is really unprecedented. And there's a ton of potential, but it has to be managed well. And to do that, we need the private sector and the public sector putting their best foot forward, working together. Thank you all for being here, and please give a round of applause for our panelists.